The anesthesia wasn't supposed to fail. The first sensation wasn't the relief of waking up, but a screaming, deep ache in the pit of my abdomen, right where the surgical team had rearranged my insides. That pain brought me back too fast, dragging my brain out of the chemically induced fog 3 hours ahead of schedule. I tried to shift, to groan, to signal the pain, but nothing happened. My head was pinned to the pillow. My limbs were cement. I was fully conscious, trapped inside a body that refused to obey orders. It was the purest form of panic I had ever known, silent and total.
The anesthesia wasn't supposed to fail. My head was pinned to the pillow, my limbs were cement, I was fully conscious.
Trapped inside a body that refused to obey orders. It was the purest form of panic I had ever known, silent and total.
My eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the dim, sterile hospital light. I saw the foredrip, the oxygen tube resting lightly under my nose, and then Julian K. was standing by the window, his back mostly to me, speaking into his phone in a voice that was low, practiced, and entirely too intimate. 4 o'clock, Darius. Not a minute later. I tried to focus, fighting the residual chemical pull dragging me back under. Julian Vance, my husband of 14 years, the man who had promised in sickness and in health, dressed in a sharp, slate gray suit, looking less like a worried spouse and more like a CEO closing a merger. Look, the wire transfer for the initial cash assets went through yesterday, just like we planned, he continued, glancing at his reflection in the glass, adjusting the cuff of his shirt. But the real juice is the Phoenix Fund. You secured the authentication keys. I initiate the final sell-off at 4 p.m. EST sharp. She'll be out until at least 7. We're clear.
Julian Vance, my husband, was looking less like a worried spouse and more like a CEO closing a merger.
The real juice is the Phoenix Fund. You secure the authentication keys. I initiate the final sell-off at 4 p.m. EST sharp. She'll be out until at least 7. We're clear.
My heart, already stressed from the surgery, hammered against my ribs like a fist hitting drywall. Phoenix Fund. That was everything. Our retirement, the equity from our home sale, the bulk of my mother's inheritance money. Julian had insisted on managing, calling it our long-term growth portfolio. He was cleaning me out. He was using the timing of my major surgery, the recovery window designed to ensure I was helpless to take every single cent and disappear. I wanted to scream his name, to unleash the fury that was burning away the surgical chill. But my vocal cords felt thick and useless, incapable of producing anything louder than a shallow, ragged breath. He didn't even flinch. He just nodded into the phone. Yes, Darius Thorne. I'll meet you at the airport lounge. By the time Kincaid realizes what happened, I'll be enjoying a very long, permanent vacation. Kincaid. He used my maiden name. The switch flipped, turning paralysis into pure, focused rage. If you've ever had a moment where the person you trusted most revealed themselves to be a monster, the kind of shock that makes you feel physically ill and utterly betrayed, you know exactly what I was fighting through right then. That kind of cold, calculated cruelty makes your blood boil. Please, hit the like button right now. We're fighting this together. I had to move. I had to stop him. My eyes darted across the room, searching for a weapon, a call button, anything. Okay, there was the call button, taped to the sheet near my left shoulder continent away. But then I saw it, my phone. The hospital staff, bless their efficiency, had placed my phone precariously on the edge of the bedside table, angled slightly downward. I had been watching a documentary right before the pre-op drugs hit. It was just 6 inches away from my right hand. 6 inches of impossible, agonizing distance. I focused every ounce of my will, the surgical pain momentarily eclipsed by the adrenaline of survival, into my right forearm. Nothing. Then the wrist, a tremor. Finally, the pinky finger. I willed the finger forward, centimeter by centimeter. It was an effort that felt like lifting a boulder. The rest of my body was screaming not from pain, but from the impossible tension of trying to move a single digit while the anesthetic demanded stillness. Julian was still talking, now discussing logistics, his voice cheerful. The secured laptop is under her bed, charging. I'll grab it on the way out. Just need to make sure the bank registers my location as home for the transfer. Under the bed, the hidden evidence, the tool he needed to finish me. My pinky brushed the edge of the phone. I hadn't moved the whole device. I had only managed to slide my hand forward by millimeters. Now, I needed to activate the voice assistant. Kai needed to hear me. Hi, but I couldn't speak. Then I remembered a trick I used to play with my niece, making clicking sounds with my tongue. Maybe, just maybe, if I clicked hard enough, the phone's microphone would register a sound spike and activate Siri. I tensed my jaw, gathering a small pool of saliva, focusing every remaining muscle fiber into the tiny click of my tongue against my palate. Click. It was weak, muffled, lost almost entirely in the hum of the ventilator nearby. I tried again, harder, risking a sound loud enough that Julian might hear. Click. The screen flickered. A soft, blue glow emanated from the small, oval icon on the display. Siri was listening.
I willed the finger forward, centimeter by centimeter. It was an effort that felt like lifting a boulder.
My pinky brushed the edge of the phone. Now, I needed to activate the voice assistant. Click. Siri is listening.
Open Wells Fargo mobile app, I whispered internally, praying the internal microphone was sensitive enough to pick up the vibration of my jaw. The screen changed. Julian, finishing his call, clicked off the phone and slipped it into his pocket. He turned, smiling that false, handsome smile that used to melt me. Just finishing up a few work calls. Sweetheart, he murmured, crossing the room to the bed. My eyes, still open, had to slam shut instantly. I needed to look like I was in the deepest anesthetic sleep. He couldn't know I was awake. Meanwhile, under the sheet, my pinky was still active, guiding the hidden app. The app opened. Needed to get to the transfer menu. Then the block all outgoing wires feature. It was a 3-step authentication process, and I was only on step 1. Julian reached under the hospital bed, retrieving the small, sleek laptop. He stood up, placing the laptop in his briefcase. He leaned over me. The smell of his expensive cologne that I used to love now smelled like poison. He pressed his lips gently against my forehead, a final, horrifying performance of devotion. Sleep well, Evie, he murmured, his voice laced with triumph.
He leaned over me. The smell of his expensive cologne now smelled like poison. He pressed his lips gently against my forehead. A final, horrifying performance of devotion.
Well, Evie.
He murmured, his voice laced with triumph.
Sleep well, Evie.
Everything is going to be just fine. He walked out the door. The moment the click of the latch confirmed his exit, my eyes snapped open, blazing. My pinky was vibrating against the screen. It's currently staring at the final authentication prompt. Confirm, wire block, enter password. I had less than 20 minutes until 4 p.m., but I had a bigger problem. Julian had the laptop, and he would be logging in from the airport soon. Needed to block that transfer now, and I needed to do it without the password. But how? And what happens when he realizes the block is in place and comes storming back here, demanding answers from his sleeping wife? Tell me what I should do next. What is the one thing I can ask Siri to do without needing the physical password? Comment below and let me know how I should crush him before he even reaches the gate. The click of the latch was the sweetest sound of freedom and the bitterest note of impending doom. 3:42 p.m., 18 minutes until the 4 p.m. window opened and Julian Vance, the man who had shared my bed and my life for 15 years, would clean out the remaining $1.7 million in the Phoenix Fund, our retirement, our legacy, my security, and vanish into the thin air of some non-extradition island. My eyes burned, but I kept them focused on the phone screen, vibrating beneath the thin hospital sheet. The screen screamed, confirm wire block, enter password. I knew the password. Of course, I knew it. More vincit omnia. Love conquers all. The stupid, saccharine Latin phrase Julian insisted on using for everything. the one he clearly never believed in. But I couldn't type it. My right pinky was the only thing I could barely control, a microscopic tremor against the glass. Even if I could somehow manage the 7 letters and 4 numbers of the combined passwords, which I couldn't, not without fine motor control, I was running out of time. And if I failed, the bank system would lock me out for 5 minutes, giving Julian a clean shot at 4 p.m. I pulled my concentration back, fighting the residual haze of the anesthetic. Kay needed a distraction, a grenade thrown into his meticulous schedule. Julian wasn't running alone. Kay, he had a connection. The muscle, the guy he owed money to but was using for protection. Darius Thorne. Julian was supposed to meet Darius at the private hangar terminal at 4:15 p.m. If I could compromise that meeting, even slightly, Julian would panic. He was greedy, but he was also a coward. I focused every ounce of my will onto the phone's microphone, trying to position the speaker grill closer to my chin, using only the barest, agonizing flex of my neck muscles. The phone shifted, maybe half an inch. Click. The tiny sound was like a gunshot in the sterile silence. I didn't quite catch that. The polite female voice of the phone assistant whispered. Relief and terror surged simultaneously. It worked. I needed the voice to sound normal, coherent, and urgent. I clenched my teeth, trying to push sound past my paralyzed throat, forcing a dry, raspy whisper that sounded nothing like my usual voice. "Hey Siri," I croaked. "Text, Darius Thorne. Urgent." It took 3 excruciating seconds for the phone to process the command. What would you like to say to Darius Thorne? Thought of the most damaging, immediate threat. Julian's entire escape hinged on discretion. He thought he was untouchable until he was on the plane. Text message reads. I whispered, the words scraping my throat raw. Plan compromised. Evie is awake. Fads at the hospital. Abort now. If you've ever felt this kind of cold, pure, justified rage, the kind that makes you forget your own cane, just to watch the person who betrayed you burn, then click the like button right now. We're in this fight together. Sending text message to Darius Thorne. Plan compromised. Evie is awake. Feds at the hospital. Abort now. Send or change. Send, I managed, my head throbbing. A moment later, the phone confirmed. Message sent.
I whispered, the words scraping my throat raw. Hey Siri, text Darius Thorne. Urgent. Plan compromised. Evie is awake. Feds at the hospital. Abort now.
3:49 p.m. I had succeeded in throwing a massive monkey wrench into his exit strategy, but the financial threat was still imminent. The Phoenix Fund transfer was scheduled to initiate automatically at the top of the hour, unless Julian canceled it, or unless I blocked it. I wrestled the phone back under the sheet, trying to bring the screen up again. I still needed that password. I needed a miracle. Suddenly, the door swung open, and I didn't have time to react. Mrs. Kincaid. It was Nurse Beatrice Hawthorne, a formidable woman built like a refrigerator, holding a clipboard and a syringe. My eyes slammed shut again, the deep, heavy closure of someone heavily sedated. The phone, still active, was clutched in my right hand, covered by the sheet, pressed against my thigh. Beatrice came close, her movements brisk. Time for the next round of antibiotics. Dear, it's just a little pinch. She pulled the sheet down to expose my arm, and I felt the cold swipe of alcohol, the sharp sting of the needle. I fought the urge to flinch, to breathe rapidly, to make any sound that would indicate the hurricane of planning happening inside my skull. She finished, taped the IV line, and pulled the sheet back up, thankfully covering the evidence. She didn't notice the strange, rigid way my right hand was gripping the phone. You have a good rest now, she said, before clicking the lights down and leaving. 3:55 p.m. 5 minutes. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by raw systemic exhaustion. My head felt heavy, and the anesthesia seemed to be regaining its footing, pulling me down into the fuzzy abyss of genuine sleep. I stared at the password prompt, Amor Vinch Omnia. If I couldn't type it, and I couldn't say it without the nurse hearing me, and I couldn't risk a failed attempt. Then what? Then a cold realization hit me. Julian was relying on the Phoenix Fund security protocol. 3 different methods of authentication required before any large-scale transfer. He had the laptop 1 method and the internal bank access code 2 methods. The 3rd method was always the same, a 6-digit code sent to his primary cell phone number. And Julian was so arrogant, so convinced of his genius, that he had never bothered to change the primary contact number since we set up the fund. It was my burner phone, the one I used for anonymous charity work and spam calls, the one Julian thought I had thrown away years ago. The phone was in my purse, hanging on the back of the hospital door. This was impossible. I couldn't move my arm, let alone cross the room. But wait, if the transfer was about to start, Julian would be waiting for that SMS code to finalize the transfer on his laptop. If I could use Siri to access that secondary number and intercept the code. I took a shaky, painful breath. Click. "Hey Siri," I whispered, barely audible. "Open my bank application." The application, thankfully, was still open. I navigated back to the main menu. I didn't need to block the wire. I needed to change the verification method to my phone. Under the security tab, buried deep in the settings, was the option. Using my pinky, the slow, jerky movements were agonizing, but I finally touched the change primary contact field. "Hey Siri," I strained, my voice cracking. "Enter the following phone number." I recited the number of the burner phone, forcing the digits out one by one. System alert. A verification text has been sent to the new number. Please enter the code to confirm the change. 3:59 p.m. Julian would be hitting the confirm transfer button any second now, and he would be expecting the code to arrive on his actual phone. When it didn't arrive, he would panic. But the bank system wouldn't lock him out, would just wait for the verification code. I had effectively turned the final lock into a waiting game. I had crippled Darius. I had stalled Julian. But I needed the code to complete the security change and redirect the entire transfer back into a locked trust account. The code was on the burner phone across the room. I was stuck, listening to the clock tick down to 4 p.m. The door swung open again. Not Beatrice. Julian Vance stood in the doorway, face pale, jacket half off, looking like he'd been hit by a truck. He looked absolutely frantic, sweat beading on his forehead. Darius must have received a text. Julian didn't look at me. He looked around the room, clearly searching for something. He spotted the small, elegant briefcase by the bed. He strode toward it, throwing open the lid and pulling out the sleek laptop he had supposedly just taken with him. Slapped it open, furiously logging in. He was canceling the 4 p.m. transfer not because he had a heart, but because he was terrified the feds were here and he needed to wipe the slate clean before they got here. I had won the battle for the timeline, but he was still inside the bank system. My pinky was still twitching against the phone screen under the sheet, waiting for the verification code I couldn't access. Julian muttered a curse, his fingers flying across the trackpad. He was desperately trying to abort the transaction. Come on, he hissed. He slammed the laptop shut and grabbed the briefcase. He glanced over at my still form. His expression shifted instantly from fear to practiced sorrow. "I have to go, Evie," he murmured, leaning over. "Urgent business trip." He kissed my forehead again, cold and mechanical. He turned to leave, but then, right as he reached the door, he stopped and looked back at me one last time, a strange, calculating look in his eye. "Just to be safe," he whispered, mostly to himself. He strode back to the bed, reached under the sheet, and grabbed my right hand, sliding the phone out from my grip. He tucked it into the pocket of his jacket. "Wouldn't want you to accidentally call the nurse," he lied. He thought he had just taken my final piece of evidence and communication. He had no idea that while he was canceling the wire transfer, the burner phone, which held the single, most important 6-digit code in my entire life, was ringing silently in my purse, waiting for me to retrieve it. And he had no idea he had just activated the phone's touchless feature by moving it.
He strode back to the bed, reached under the sheet, and grabbed my right hand. He gently lifted my hand, sliding the phone out from my grip.
Wouldn't want you to accidentally call the nurse, he lied. He had no idea the burner phone was ringing silently in my purse, waiting for me.
Now I have no phone, but he's gone, and the transfer is stalled. He will be back. Julian Vance does not leave $1.7 million on the table just because of a scary text message. K. He will realize the feds aren't here and that he's been played. K. When he does, he will come back for the money, and he will come back for me. My purse is 5 feet away. K. The burner phone holds the key to the ultimate trap. Tell me how I get that purse without being able to move a muscle. Comment below, because the next time Julian walks through that door, the game ends, and I need to be holding all the cards.